Hi everyone, just thought I'd do a quick, or reasonably quick, animation of this character here, which we've got some lip sync we want to add to him, and we've got a little bit of preset dialogue. So I thought it'd be interesting just to go through the process and show you all how that's done. So the first thing I'm going to do, and there's some steps here which are only possible if you've got the plugin Acculips for iClone, or Accuface, sorry, not Acculips, Accuface, which is an extra plugin. If you don't have that plugin, you won't be able to do some of these steps, but a lot of this will be very useful to you, hopefully. I just want to show you this method I've come up with for doing lip sync if you've got a webcam but it's not a very good one, or you don't have access to really good lighting, because Accuface does require some pretty good lighting to get the best results. So what I've come up with is using these online tools, this particular site called VidNoz, which actually allows you to do AI generated talking heads. So it gives you 3 minutes a day, which is pretty much more than you'll ever need, um, depending on how fast my internet's going to be. So I'm logged in, create a video. I'm going to create a portrait video. Right, so here we go. So I've got a bunch of preset photo avatars here. Depending on the character I use, like this is my generic face, which works for quite a lot of characters. But for this particular character, I'm going to use this face because he's got a bit of a wider mouth, and this one tends to work better for characters with wider mouths. So this is a 3D character that I made myself in iClone, so I'm just going to expand it a little bit so we get the best results from the facial capture. And then upload voice. So we've got a pre-recorded lines here for him that we're going to upload. Okay, so yeah, deduct 11 seconds. You've got 3 minutes a day. That's more than you'll ever need for this kind of thing. So generate now. That's going to take a little bit of time. So once again, I'll do a time skip and show you when that's done. Right, there you go. So that's done.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabbath table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
So that's given me a video of those lines with lip sync or lip movement to capture using the Accuface. There's a lot of head motion and eye motion and stuff in there as well, which I'm probably not going to use. So, but for the moment, we'll just download it, and I'll show you how to get rid of that in iClone. Okay, so here's our video inside Accuface. Um, Exporting out of VidNoz has been a bit unusual lately. The videos used to come into Accuface absolutely fine and load perfectly, but now they've sort of half and half the time they crash, half the time they don't. So this time it did. So what I've done here is I just took the video into Premiere and re-exported it, and at the same time I blew it up a little bit, made it a little bit bigger for hopefully more precise facial tracking. So that's not a terrible thing if you have to do that. So the first thing we need to do, which is quite important, is to calibrate facial capture. So generally, your first frame is always going to be your neutral frame. So neutral face, set expression, and done. Now, there's a whole bunch of other ones there that you can do if you're doing facial capture off your own webcam, but for this purpose, we're just going to use neutral face, which is this face right here. So we're going to press this button, which makes it always on top. Just going to reduce the size a little bit so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to take the scaling or the resolution down to quick mode, because if it's too high it can drop some frames and you don't want that when you're doing your facial capture. So plugins, Motion Live, switch on Accuface. So the main thing is to make sure that this IP address and this IP address match so that it can connect. We want to switch on the audio and make sure it's on Acculips, so that's going to create the visemes after it does the facial capture, and make sure that the Accuface is switched on to the face, which it is. So now, just going to do a quick test, make sure both of the play bars are at the beginning, which they are, do a preview, and off we go.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabbath table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
Okay, that's not too bad. So I'm going to go with that and record that. And this time when I record it, it's going to take a second pass and create the visemes for the mouth shapes as well.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
Okay, so it's done the facial capture, and now it's doing the viseme creation, converting text to speech. Okay, so that's done, and that has put it all down here. I'm just going to minimize that motion so we can see what we're doing. So the first thing I want to do here, well, first I'll just play it down and see how it came out.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
Not too bad. Could be better, could be worse. So first thing I want to do is check the words. So there's lots of mistakes here. So we go through and correct those. So that particularly does got that particularly bad. The bad run at the Sabac table. It didn't recognize either of those words. So this will help it create more precise facial shapes. I am Jabba the Hutt's personal, how do you spell masseuse? Masseuse. Not like that apparently. Anyway, so once you've done that, align, you don't want to add those words to the dictionary. Doesn't matter if you don't. So align. Yep, so now we apply. So that's created a bit more accurate visemes, hopefully. So if we play that down now.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
Yeah, that seems to be slightly improved. So now I can turn off Accuface, turn off Motion Live. I've turned the resolution back up.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates.
So first thing I'm going to do after that, lots of first things here. So next I'm going to go into lip options, maybe turn the smoothness down a little bit, and then apply. So you can turn that down, you can turn the mouth movement strength up, if you like.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
So the other thing you're looking out for is if any of these visemes are a bit too close together and create a bit of flickering in the mouth.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates.
So maybe just there. I mean, this isn't too bad, but maybe just there.
Physiotherapy and
So we can get rid of one of these, maybe space these out just a little bit.
Physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table.
Yeah, so you could go through and do that, as much as you want until you're happy with the mouth
Originally, I
motions.
trained in physiotherapy and Pilates.
So he's got some facial movements on there, obviously from the VidNoz video.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and
head
Pilates.
movements. So if I want to get rid of those completely, I mean, they're not too bad actually.
And now, after a
They're
particular
adding a bit of naturalness to the movement and the talking. But if I wanted to get rid of them completely, I would go to my expression clip here and smooth the expression clip and just take everything, head, neck, and maybe even the brow and eyelids and blinks all the way up to 100. So that if I applied that,
I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly
that's
bad
taken all that off, and so you've got a blank slate to build on with your own movements that you could start adding in. But I'm going to not do that because I'm quite happy
and now, after a
with this as a base. So building on that base, the next thing I'm going to do is go into facial key to start enhancing some of these mouth motions a little bit better. I've used to use Face Puppet a lot, but I've really taken a liking to facial key. It gives you a bit more precision over the expressions. So first thing we want to do is make sure that key all expressions is switched on, and then go into modify. And so this is a list of everything we can work with here. And this is, I do this in kind of in a few different passes based on what needs to be done. First thing generally though is oftentimes the jaw doesn't open wide enough on some of these facial captures. So I'm going to go through and add some wider mouth motion. So just playing it down again.
Originally, I trained in physio.
Trained.
I trained.
Might open that a little bit wider. So go to jaw, open it up a bit more. I'm just going to zoom in on the timeline there so I can be a bit more precise. So go to slightly before, close the jaw, go to slightly after, close the jaw.
Originally, I trained in physio. I trained in physio.
So therapy might open a bit more as well.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates.
The other thing to watch out is for make sure on words like Pilates, P, make sure the mouth is closing completely, because you can't say Pilates without closing your mouth completely. And this one is actually doing that, so that's quite good.
Physiotherapy and Pilates. And now, after a part,
Now,
now,
after, I might open it up a bit wider there. So once again, set the full width, or fully open, and then put a frame on either side. That's the jaw motion, and that lip sync is actually looking pretty good. So now we can go back, we can go to face key for now. Usually you don't want to add motion until you're absolutely fine with the facial movements, the expressions, the lip sync, that kind of thing, because as soon as the character is moving, it becomes harder to track those. But because this guy is just going to be standing still and talking, I'm just going to go ahead and add a very simple idle motion on him here. And then we can go ahead and personalize that a little bit as well. So idle, just breathing. So we're going to have to repeat that a couple of times.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the
So
Sabic
because
table,
I'm going to be editing this whole motion, we want to flatten but keep all keys, which makes it one continuous motion clip rather than two extended ones, if you know what I mean. So now I'm going to just adjust his position a little bit because I'm not quite sure about that 3/4 kind of look. So just starting on the first frame, I'm going to go to animation and edit motion layer and just rotate him around a little bit. And rotate his head as well. Position. I'm just going to also delete that because we don't need that. That was for another thing. So now he's more.
originally I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
So he's probably going to look away on that pause, let's say. So now we can go and create a new layer, which is like a non-destructible animation layer here. So we can build on top of our original animation. Oh, actually, before I do that, I'm just going to show you something else, is the direct puppet, which is actually quite useful. If you've just got a very basic motion, like this one, which is just an idle with a breathing motion, but you want to personalize it a little bit to go with what's being said on screen, you can do something very simple like this, which is just a rotation. Oops, not that one, that one. A rotation on the spine.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and
So just that's going to create a new motion over the top of this one. So if I hit record, that screen-based rotation on that middle part of the spine.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
So he just turns away a little bit on that pause, and there's a little bit of motion, extra motion through it. So as you can see, it's a bit jerky because I was just moving that around with the mouse. So what we can do then is go to the base motion, which is where I put it, unlock that track, and under motion, if I right click on here, I can smooth motion clips and smooth the torso right up to about 10 or 11.
Particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
So that little bit of extra motion is still there, but it's not quite so noticeable. It's not so jerky.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates.
So because this guy is supposed to be talking to an interviewer, his eyes are a little bit all over the place. So we want him to focus on something. So what we can do there is to create a primitive shape, like a sphere. And this is going to be our interviewer, if you like. So this is what he's looking at. So just place it about head height, in line with where he's roughly looking. And now, once again, on the first frame, we're going to pick target for look at. This is under the modify menu. Pick target and sphere. You can adjust the amount that his head and body turns to face that target as well. And you can add associated eyebrow movement with those two. So now,
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic
so
table,
now he's going to be looking at that the whole time. So I don't want him to keep looking at it there because I want him to look away, so we can set it free. Now this it's not open automatically. It's under, oh, it is, it's open on here, but sometimes you might have to switch this on. It's just called the constraint track. So that's it down here. So now we can look away. If that's a bit too jerky, which it is, you can extend that to,
I'm
so
Jabba.
he looks away, and then we pick the target again, so he looks back. So too
I'm
fast
Jabba.
again. Just move it slightly to the side and extend the transition time.
I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
Okay. So that's using the constraint track to give him something to look at. So his eyes are,
Originally, I trained in
they're consistent in what he's looking at.
physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
So that's a good start.
The Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt.
So the thing about animated characters in general is the human brain is very good at seeing when somebody isn't thinking or is just looking at nothing for no reason. And this is what this guy's doing here.
Sabic table,
He
I'm
looks
Jabba
away,
the
but
Hutt's
there's no purpose there.
Sabic table.
So suddenly
I'm
his
Jabba.
character is a bit lifeless. So we need to add a bit of life to him there. So what we can do there is recreate that animation layer, which I was talking about before. So this is the non-destructive animation layer. And we're going to go to Edit Motion Layer. And so now, when he starts to look away, I'm just going to set, and this is on the motion track, by the way, I'm going to set a keyframe here and do a much bigger turn for him.
Table.
So he turns away. I'm going to copy and paste that.
I'm,
Comes back.
I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse. Table. I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse. Originally, I
personality
trained
there. So this is where we come back to the face key. I don't know why I'm getting that message, by the way, but it doesn't seem to have much of an effect. So let's just focus on this a little bit for now. So there he's looking at somebody, there he's not. He's kind of drifting. So we're going to go down to the expression track and start fine-tuning that. So I'm going to go to I look. So I'm going to create a keyframe here just by moving something up and down. So that creates a keyframe. So we want him to start looking to the right. Okay, and to about there. And his eyes, I want his eyes to come back before his head does. So I'm going to take those right down and push looking left, right up. And because we've got that constraint,
I'm
he's meeting the
Jabba the
camera quite nicely.
at the fabric table. I'm
So
Jabba
now
the
his
Hutt's
eyes look alive. He looks like he's
run at the fabric table.
looking away for a reason.
I'm Jabba
Okay?
fabric table.
Still not a lot of expression there, so we need kind of a cringy look. Oh god, my life's gone terribly. So I'm going to put a mouth move on here. I'm going to move his mouth up. I'm going to sneer his nose up a bit. I'm going to take his brows up and maybe squint his eyelids down. You can even go to the mouth.
I'm Jabba the fabric table. I'm Jabba the
When
fabric
you have an eye motion like that, what looks really nice is just a little bit of a blink in between as well. So we might put an eye blink there on the turn. And I often like to complement that with a little bit of a squint so the rest of the face moves with the blink as well.
fabric table. Fabric table.
And maybe when he
I'm
comes back to another blink, just in between these two keyframes here. So a blink, and oftentimes a squint at the same time.
I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse. Fabric table. I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
Okay, so zooming back out again. Now the next thing I'll do, I mean this is an ongoing process. I'm going to go right through this and fine-tune expressions all the way through. That was just kind of give you an idea of how that process might work. But the next thing I would do
Originally, I trained
is look at the mouth shapes. Because
originally I trained in physiotherapy and
the
Pilates.
expressions aren't too bad at the moment, but they can be enhanced by extending the mouth a little bit more, exaggerating it in certain places.
Now, after a
So let's go look
particular
at this one, particularly.
after a particular
So just going to zoom in on the expression track so I can see what we're doing. So let's say he's exaggerating that word, particularly. So I find these ones really useful. Stretch, mouth stretch, are particularly So once again, just adding a keyframe there for the stretch. What you do have to look out for, you see what's happening here, is if you exaggerate it too much, his face starts breaking through. So sometimes you've got a limit on how much you can do.
after a
But
particularly after a particularly
see that's already added a little bit of extra character there. So at the same point, maybe we can particularly squint his eyes.
after a
So that's a
particularly
little too fast. So I'm going to go to the previous keyframe and begin the eye squint here. And I'm going to go to the next frame and smooth out the eye squint there so it's not too sudden.
after a particularly bad
And same with the brow. I'm going to drop the brow. it out on the previous and the following frames.
After a particularly bad run at particular.
The nose is a useful one too, nose sneer, particularly. So same again, smoothing it out on the previous and the following frames.
After a particularly bad run. Originally, I trained in physio.
Trained.
Trained in.
So mouth move. These ones here can be quite useful.
Originally, I trained in physio.
That's a little too sudden. Again, just smoothing it out on either side. I'm going to create another keyframe here where it's all the way down.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates.
Stretch it.
Therapy and Pilates. Therapy and Pilates.
You just keep refining.
Originally, I
Finding
trained in
new points
physiotherapy
in the dialogue where you want to put an expression, a micro expression. Sometimes your expression might be just a few frames long. A lip curl, a mouth stretch, anything, a head turn, anything that's going to enhance this performance.
Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's
So
personal
I'd say this is
masseuse.
about a quarter of the way done, and I'm going to keep working on this and keep enhancing, keep tutoring with it basically until I'm happy with what I've got. And luckily, through the magic of editing, I can show you the finished product.
Originally, I trained in physiotherapy and Pilates, and now, after a particularly bad run at the Sabic table, I'm Jabba the Hutt's personal masseuse.
So I hope you found that useful. I hope that's given you some inspiration of how to move forward on some of your own works and some useful new tools. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.